Hi, good evening, all of you. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that is very close to my heart, that is philosophy. But of course, I'm not going to talk about all the four sections of philosophy, that is uh, ethics, epistemology, ontology, and ethics. I am going to talk about how to approach philosophy for the beginners. Okay, so let me add a fifth column or a fifth domain, that is called the history of philosophy. So if the history of ideas, if the cultural history, if the social and the political movement interest you, then I think history of philosophy is one thing that is definitely to be read, and it is definitely to be read to put things in perspective. Okay, so if you understand, if you want to understand the world as it is today, okay, and what are the forces, what are the intellectual forces that have shaped the world as it is now, okay, you cannot choose to overlook history of philosophy by any chance. Of course, there are many books available about on the subject of history of philosophy, and my intention is not to add any further books, rather to put all these books in perspective. So the first book to start with, I guess all of you must have guessed it, is uh, The Story of Philosophy by Will Durant. It requires a genius to write history of philosophy as a poetry is written. It requires a genius of supreme order to write history of philosophy, okay, in the way some of the lyrical novels are written. So there Will Durant stands, okay, someone of supreme importance. You cannot choose to overlook this book. Moreover, this 300 pages of book, okay, took 11 years by Will Durant to write it. Okay, so please read the story of philosophy. Rest, I'll talk about each of these books in its individual and necessary detail in the further video, but in today's video, I'll give you a perspective as to what to read. So if you have finished the story of philosophy by Will Durant, then next comes to our consideration a book by one of the most paradigmatic, one of the most iconic, one of the most encyclopedic geniuses of our time, who was professionally a mathematician at Cambridge University, Trinity College, Cambridge University. He was professionally a mathematician. He wrote volumes of books on philosophy, and he was awarded a Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1954, sorry, 1954. And infamously said that marriage is a legalized prostitution in his book Marriage and Morals. So I guess most of you must have guessed it. So once you have finished the story of philosophy by Will Durant, the immediate book that all of you must start with is The History of Western Philosophy. Okay, one of the 100 books by guardian.co.uk that is to be read apart from the philosophical insight, okay, is how English should be written, how you should write English, how you should broach an argument, okay, how you should construct an argument, how you can demolish an argument, how you can strengthen an argument, how you can weaken an argument, how you can point towards the paradox of an argument, how you can point towards the flaws of an argument. Okay, so an immensely engaging book it is. Okay, one of the most immensely engaging book on the subject, at the same time one of the most controversial book. Okay, let me read some of the receptions about this book, how this book has been received by equally paradigmatic and iconic geniuses of its time. Okay, so no wonder The History of Western Philosophy was praised by physicists such as Albert Einstein and Erwin Schrödinger's. Okay, uh, Bishop and another philosopher, Frederick Copleston, calls this book as unusually lively and entertaining, but added that Russell's treatment of a number of important philosophers is both inadequate and misleading. Okay, not to mention Wittgenstein is missing from it. Okay, Voltaire is missing from it. Okay, there is hardly a proper treatment to Hegel. Okay, Martin Heidegger is missing from this book, and that is why George Steiner, okay, calls this book as vulgar, because Martin Heidegger is missing from this book. Okay, whereas a philosopher Roger Scruton calls this book as elegantly written and witty, but faulted it for Russell's concentration on pre-Cartesian philosophy and lack of understanding of Immanuel Kant. So in a nutshell, okay, this book is an indispensable read for philosophy. If at all you want to read how witty a genius, okay, and how independent minded a genius like Russell can be. And no wonder he was a cold blooded logician. He subjected his own logic, his own statement to close scrutiny, okay, and for the immense intellectual honesty that is hugely missing these days, this book has to be read. Okay, immediately once you finish the history of Western philosophy, okay, let us go back to the pre-Socratic philosophers, okay, Heraclitus, Anaximander, Pythagoras, Thales. Okay, so for that a very interesting read. It is by one of the classicists, John Burton, that is early Greek philosophy. Okay, John Burnet, pardon, it's John Burnet. Okay, early Greek philosophy, a very easy, lucid read. Okay, all the philosophers, all the pre-Socratic philosophers have been mentioned. Okay, and the things are put in perspective. So please read it. Now, these are the history of philosophy. I think by reading these three books, enough perspective you should have developed by now. Now come to a little bit the technical nuances of the history of philosophy. So there is an amazing book and one-stop solution for those who are not the university student of philosophy, but those who want to delve into a little technical nuances. Okay, not like a layman, but a technical nuances into the history of philosophy or the key ideas of philosophy. So here it is published at Routledge, India. Routledge, India. Okay, an introduction to philosophy by John Hospers. So there the chapters are treated thematically, like what is knowledge, what is rationality, what is determinism, okay, what is God, okay, what is language, what is perception, and all these things are discussed in its necessary details. And interestingly, this is a book like no other, in a sense that in every chapter there are two characters, A and B, who are having a conversation, a dialectic, a dialogue with each other, and they're playing a devil's advocate to each other to further the argument. Okay, and each argument is equally compelling. So I think reading this will be an enriching experience. So please go for it. Only and once you finish these three. Okay, so this is the fourth one. Well, if you have finished all these four books, then I would like you to introduce you to the New History of Western Philosophy by Anthony Kenny. Okay, it's again an amazing book, a little more into the technical details of the individual study, the individual achievements of each philosophers in details, arranged thematically. Okay, here the mistake that Russell has repeated, or the pre-inclinations or the pretensions or the biases of Russell, okay, is somehow corrected, and philosophers, okay, till the time of Derrida are discussed. Okay, so I think this is the book that is to be read. Now, the last one and the most difficult one is again by my favorite, Bertrand Russell. Okay, an outline of philosophy. But again, I warn you, this is not the kind of outline that you read in your school and college days. Okay, so do not be misled, do not be mistaken by the word outline, because again, the word outline has many different meanings. Okay, so here the outline of philosophy, okay, means as much epistemological details about the approaches to philosophy as possible, and that is what Russell does. So this is also an good introduction to the approach to epistemology, like what is knowledge, okay, what is man's place in universe, what is perception, what is matter, okay, knowledge versus intuition, perception versus reality, okay, deductive logic versus inductive logic, okay, and all such problems of philosophy has been discussed. But this is a difficult book, okay, so not to be mistaken by the title, not to be mistaken by the length of the book. So this is the last book that you are supposed to read. In my next video, I'm going to talk about each one of these books in individual details. Till the time, you can start with Will Durant's Story of Philosophy, and then you can move on to Bertrand Russell, History of Western Philosophy. Thank you guys. Happy reading.